Vintage Model Traction Engine Restoration Part 13. A new pressure gauge, refitting the regulator handle and link, plus making final adjustments to the big end bearing. This old 1-inch diameter pressure gauge is one I've had in my drawer for quite a long time. It came from a company called Bruce Engineering, who used to sell Stuart models. I fitted it to the traction engine because the original 3/4 of an inch diameter pressure gauge was damaged. And this morning in the post, as well as these 3 paintbrushes, which are Winsor & Newton paintbrushes and very good quality, this arrived. Very interesting packaging. I wonder what's in here. Let me guess. It's a brand new 3/4 of an inch diameter pressure gauge, 0 to 80 pounds per square inch. I bought this pressure gauge from a company called Clevedon Steam. I've bought things off them before. The service and standards are very high, and the delivery was very quick. The first thing I'm going to do with it is invalidate the warranty. I need to fix this pressure gauge to the bulkhead, so I've removed the existing 10BA machine screw, and I'm going to replace it with a longer one. In this clip I'm just testing that the 10BA machine screw that I'm going to use is not too long. I'm fitting this new pressure gauge in exactly the same way as you've just seen me remove the other one, except in reverse. And you will notice that I always use a second spanner on the square part of the pressure gauge. If you don't do this, you can damage the pressure gauge. And I don't want to do this because I've already invalidated the warranty by removing the screw that holds the back in place. Now I'm going to fit the pressure gauge to the bulkhead. Nothing difficult here, I just screw the 10BA bolt in place and everything's fine. That's another job out of the way. Now it's time to refit the regulator handle and the linkage. Underneath the handle was a very badly turned brass bush. This brass bush was too thick, so I couldn't tighten up the bolt without it working loose. So I reduced its thickness in the lathe, and in this clip I'm fitting the bolt that holds it all together. I'm calling it a bolt, but really it's not a bolt. It has a thick part that is the bearing for the handle, then it has a threaded part that screws into the bracket on the bulkhead. This next bit was difficult, and I'm really glad that I didn't drop this little bolt on the floor. It is very small. I think it's probably about 12BA. I never use this size, they're too small for me. Sadly, my eyesight is not as good as it could be. Note to self, go and have your eyes tested. It's 15 years since the last visit. I must admit I'm really bad at this sort of stuff, going to the doctors, going to the dentist, going to eye specialists, and anywhere like that. I'm not scared of visiting those sort of places, I just never seem to get round to it. I've connected a compressed air line and here's the engine running. Note the pump eccentric rod being supported by the silicone rubber tubing. And here is the pump eccentric rod when it stopped being supported by the silicone rubber tubing. Here I'm testing the regulator's function, and as you can see it works perfectly. The engine runs well both at fast speeds and slow speeds, which is much better than it was when I first received it to mend it. And if you don't believe me, watch some earlier episodes in this series. It sounded more like a pneumatic drill. Now it sounds as it should. I'm going to make a final adjustment to the big end. First thing to do is to take this bolt off underneath the strap, which is very fiddly because it's in a very bad place. Or at least it is for me with my large oversized hands. Once again, one of the very cheap spanners from the spanner sets that I buy from Blackgates Engineering saved the day, despite being criticised by a number of viewers when I first showed them in a video. Yes, they are cheap, laser-cut spanners, but they get into places where other spanners just won't go. This one with the right-angled end is extremely useful, and the bonus is that the other end of it is a ring key, even better. Once I removed the specially shaped bolt, I could take the strap off. I felt that I needed to modify the design of the bearings, and that's just what I'm doing here. Using a needle file in each half, I'm filing a semicircle. When the bearings are cleaned up and pressed back together, they look like this. With the original small hole, I never really knew where I was, but now if I look at the bearing, I know that there's a hole in the part that's split. I cleaned up the bearing halves thoroughly and reassembled the strap. I also cleaned out the oil reservoir and put some new oil in there. Now it's running even better. This is an interesting shot. If you look at the eccentric that normally drives the water pump ram, it's floating in mid-air. It's just the viscosity of the oil on the eccentric sheave and strap, making the eccentric rod and the pump ram hover in mid-air. I'm really beginning to like this traction engine, and I'll be sad when I hand it back to the owner. At first glance, it looks more or less the same as it was when I received it to repair it. But after many hours of work, it really isn't. It's something completely different. It's actually very good. Time, I think, for some slow motion. I'll stop talking for a while. And that's it for this episode. We're back at normal speed. Stay healthy, thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful. Please take the time to visit my Mainsteam Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.